Most people try to distance themselves from the criminal they've had a relationship with. This is done to avoid internal feelings of guilt and, more importantly, to avoid being held suspect. In this video, I'll explain 3 interrelated ways in which Nichol does this. I've touched upon the first 2 of these in my previous videos, while the third one is brand new. If you haven't seen my 2 previous videos about this interview, the links are in the description box below. Before we get started though, please allow me 40 seconds to give a shout out to you who are watching my channel. I started doing English content back in August. Thanks for being active, for being involved. I believe language is an overlooked factor in establishing personality structures, so making these videos is something that I consider important work. If you're new here, welcome on board. If this type of content is for you, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel grow and spread awareness about language analysis. Incapability involves the subject downgrading the criminal they were in a relationship with. This is a pattern in Nichol's language. Chris is constantly portrayed as incapable of making his own decisions. The things that Nichol emphasizes reveals what's closest to her, what's sensitive to her. We call it sensitive when the subject, through syntax and choice of words, reveals what's most important to them.
And so I took the time, and you will see that in the text too, where I I found this apartment. It was perfect. It was so cute. I was like, it's in your price range. It's like 6 miles from the gym. It's 23 miles from work. I'm like, it's super close to Frederick. It's going to be by your kid's school. Like, this is the spot.
Phonetically, Nichol emphasizes that she took the time to help Chris. It's also a syntactic emphasis, since she places the sentence first in her statement. So it sounds like she made a sacrifice for Chris. The second most important thing to Nichol, evidently, is to provide backing for this claim, that the detectives will be able to see this in the text messages. So obviously, Nichol's very much concerned with her phone data. This has also been a pattern. She's interpreting the text messages beforehand, rather than letting the text messages speak for themselves. This is also something to look out for in police interviews, since it might reveal that the text messages are not as straightforward as the subject claims they are.
He told me he had a budget restriction, so for his apartment, and I'm pretty sure this is in the text, and this will probably be in the last couple weeks, he told me $1,100 to $1,400 when I was asking him. Because I told him I'd help him do homework. I was like, you do some homework, I'll do some homework, we'll knock this out, because if you guys are for real putting the house up, you got to figure it out. And so that was his budget. And I remember asking him, I was like, you sure you don't want to just get a house? And he's like, I never thought about a house. I'm like, yeah, you can rent houses, man. It's a thing. And he's just like, I don't know if I can afford that. I was like, okay.
Nichol's alleged role as almost a motherly figure to Chris continues in her narrative. She says she helped Chris do homework. So again we ask, what's linguistically important to Nichol? It's important to her that we understand that she was helping him, but from a distance. So we don't get a feeling that this was much more than a platonic friendship, or maybe more appropriate, a guardianship. But we know that their relationship was much more than that. What I refer to as restriction is whenever the subject is limiting their guilt and responsibility. Listen to Nichol's multiple restrictions in the following.
You said earlier that he had never, or that the apartment wasn't for you and him. It was just for him and his children?
Oh, yes.
It wasn't. You had no intentions of moving in with him?
No. I have my own spot. I still have a lease there till July. And even then, he never asked me to move in with him.
Okay.
And I never tried to move in with him. I told him, I really try to take everything with this whole situation very slow. The only part that I screwed up on was the fact that he wasn't completely separated from her when him and I decided to spend time with each other. That is where I screwed up. But other than that, everything else, it was always you build your life, I'm going to build my life, we will intertwine them, but I am not ready to do this.
We hear the restriction,
the only part that I screwed up on,
immediately followed by another.
That is where I screwed up.
With vowel stress on that, indicating that this syntactically is the key word. We then get a third restriction beginning with the paratactic conjunction but.
But other than that,
the function of but is to negate that which preceded it. This means that Nichol negates the part about her screwing up to instead emphasize that she wanted the two of them to build separate lives. She's underlining a distance between them rather than the connection they evidently had. When a person's restricting the level of their involvement with a murderer, thus disassociating themselves from that murderer, they associate with the good guys instead. In this case, the general public, or common sense, if you will. They want to show us that they're on the side of good. Listen to this.
And I'm like, so why don't we take our time? And I'm like, if you guys end up doing a week on, a week off with your kids, I'm like, the week you have your kids, be with your children. And the week that you don't, I'm like, I don't even want to see you every day. I'm like, I think we should spend like a few days of that together. I'm like, because I like my space, and I think you need your space. I think you need your space to like develop your identity again and like get it back, because I think he's just been like...
Nichol's using direct quotes to paint a picture and draw us into her narrative. A narrative about how responsible and moral she allegedly was. Notice that Chris doesn't appear to have much say in anything in Nichol's narrative. I don't even want to see you every day, Nichole's supposed to have said to him. This is nothing short of a rejection of him. One final example of this.
And we talk about things every once in a while where I'd be like, hey, if I ever meet, because like I have a lot of house plants. That's a good example. So I have a lot of house plants, and I told him, I was like, one day if I ever meet your kids, I was like, I'm going to show these girls how to like paint pottery and plants. I was like, I think they would love to see something grow that they built. I think it would be really, really cute. And like little stuff like that, but it wasn't very frequent. It wasn't, hey, we should get married, and hey, we should have babies, and hey, I want to live with you, and hey, I need to meet your children now, and let's cut the mom out. It was never like that.
She's showing a high level of awareness here, countering almost everything that the general public or the detectives would otherwise accuse her of.
Hey, I need to meet your children now, and let's cut the mom out.
So indirectly, Nichol reveals to us that she knows what's right and what's wrong, and she says all this unprovoked. So this is obviously sensitive to her. Notice how she presumably gets lost in her own narrative about plants and pottery, but still makes sure to restrict it by saying,
but it wasn't very frequent.
Syntactically, she again makes the but sentence the most prominent one, that it wasn't very frequent. As an analyst, you always have to consider the possibility that she might be using these narratives, always painting pictures for us and repeating the word cute, as a smokescreen, a distraction from her actual involvement or her real intentions. Ridicule is a controversial yet common category of language use in murder cases. The human mind is designed to repress negative stimuli, which includes guilty knowledge. A person can feel guilty about having had a relationship with a murderer, so much so that they begin ridiculing that person, again in order to create distance. Furthermore, and this is the controversial part, they can also begin ridiculing the murder victim in order to distance themselves from the horrible knowledge of the murder. Here's the first example.
And I knew that those two had been through some financial trouble. I definitely found out a lot more about that situation in the newspaper recently.
We noticed two things. Number one, Nichol's need to even mention Chris and Shanann's less than great financial situation. Number two, Nichol's happy-sounding tone of voice, which is contrapuntal, meaning there's a mismatch between the negative information and the delivery of that negative information. In the following, the detective wants to dig deeper, and notice how Nichol's answer involves the same kind of distance to both Chris and Shanann. Pay attention to her tone of voice.
Okay, so prior to the newspaper, how did you know he was in financial difficulty?
Because when I went to that house, everything in there is very, 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 very nice. It looks like it all comes with a very expensive price tag. And I didn't say anything to him about it, but I could kind of tell then where I was like just looking at everything like, how do you guys afford this? And
Nichol's also dramatizing for the detective.
So even if they're making, let's just use the figure $100,000, they're living above their means or below their
means? Oh my God, like...
Way too much.
Way
Did you ever discuss?
First with her, and then using hyperbolic language.
Did
you ever discuss?
Her next statement is more directly focused on Shanann.
He told me, he's like, I feel like my paycheck goes in my bank account and I just watch it go like this. He's like, but it doesn't have to. He's like, she makes it like that. And I was just
So was
like,
he resentful for that?
I don't know if he was resentful. I just think he was frustrated by the fact that they could be doing a lot better financially. And she, from the vibe that I got, had really bad spending habits.
I will argue that the detective picks up on Nichol's condescending tone, since he continues asking questions about Chris and Shanann's lifestyle.
So he's just got one vehicle.
Yep.
And it's a very expensive Lexus. And then they live in a pretty expensive house.
It's a huge house.
Yeah.
I was very taken back when I saw it. I was just like, whoa. How
And
do
then
you
the
guys...
fixtures inside caused you to pause.
Everything was just like...
He's allowing Nichol to further display her supposed shock.
Like I said, the only financial thing he ever said is just like, she just likes to spend money, like a lot of it. So that was just kind of the vibe that I got from that, and that it was a lifestyle that she liked to live, like very, like materialistic kind of lifestyle.
Wanted to
Like
project
it was
a certain image.
Yes, all the time. And he said that was why they got that house too. It's like she wants everybody to think that we live a certain way and that we can like sustain all this stuff. And he's like, and we can't. And I told him, I said, when you're in those situations, why don't you, I'm like, do you like voice your concern about this? And he told me, he's like, when I try to talk to her, he's like, she's really bossy and she usually shuts me out. And he's like, when she does that, he's like, I just let it go. And I was just like, all right. I mean, I don't...
Previously, Nichol portrayed Chris as irresponsible compared to her, but now she portrays Chris as responsible compared to Shanann. There's a shift here that's worth noting. Nichol even puts herself in Chris's shoes.
I don't try to like interfere with how those two interact. But I did ask about it because I'm just curious, because I would never put myself in a situation where someone was like, you know what, we're going to live in this house that costs like double what we can afford, and that's how it's going to be because I want everybody to think we're fancy. Because I wouldn't do that. I mean, to me, like I wouldn't put up with somebody doing that to me.
I will argue that Nichol then becomes aware of the fact that what she's saying might be considered unemotional, because she chooses to modify.
And I'm not saying that that's what she was doing. I mean, for all I know, he could have been completely lying about this. He could be the one spending all the money.
Sure.
You know?
This is just what he told you.
Exactly.
She presents the other side here, but in a lot less passionate and emphasizing way. Also, the modification is obviously not the first thing on her mind, since it appears late in her descriptions. Furthermore, she doesn't continue the modification. Instead, she continues emphasizing Chris's experiences with Shanann, again indirectly letting us know that this is the information that's sensitive to her.
From what it sounded like from their separation, from them trying to separate, that was a big deal for him, where he was saying that the reason that they don't really get along anymore is because he feels like he's not heard. He says that he comes home from work and he tries to talk to her and she'll just be like, 1 minute, I'm on the phone. Or she'll like scroll through social media and she like doesn't acknowledge him.
Once again, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.